Hello, my name is Jensine Paletti, and today I'm going to be briefly discussing my area of research and how I got here. My area of research is on workplace relationships, so I've titled this very brief talk, A Relational Perspective on Work Life. So first, I'm going to just very briefly talk about how I found my research interest. So my story actually starts kind of in childhood. I grew up with knowing that my grandpa and my mom had both worked at NASA. And I grew up a big space geek because of that. My grandpa worked on the lunar rover and my mom worked on the International Space Station. However, they're both engineers and I had no interest in engineering. But then when I got to undergrad, my major was psychology and neuroscience. I found kind of just by chance when I was looking for internships that NASA had research in psychology and they had internships in that area as well. So just on a whim, I ended up applying and I was really lucky enough to get the internship. While I was there, I realized the field of IO psychology was something that was really fascinating to me and something I had never heard of before. I liked what I was doing in my neuropsych lab, but I wasn't particularly interested in working with dementia patients for my career, which is what my lab was studying, just because I found it kind of emotionally draining. However, I realized that IO psychology was an area where I could do research that was related to what I had been doing, but in the context of working with healthy adults and in particular really high achieving adults such as astronauts. So I had a couple mentors from my internship who were kind enough to tell me about the field of IO psychology. They themselves were trained IO psychologists, and I ended up applying to Rice after my internship. And again, I got incredibly lucky to get in. Rice was my first choice, and I have continued exploring my interests once I got to Rice. I continued doing some research with NASA. Some of the stuff I did was working on cross-cultural training programs for astronauts who have to work with other astronauts from many different cultures in the context of working on the International Space Station. But also things like continuing to provide research that was helpful for understanding astronaut selection, picking who actually from the pile of applicants gets to be an astronaut. But one thing that really occurred to me as I continued in graduate school was my realization that what really interested me and what tied all the projects I thought were really cool together was this relational perspective, was thinking about how workplace relationships affect people and how we can improve them. So next, I want to describe what are workplace relationships, because sometimes when I say that, people assume I'm talking about romantic relationships, which I'm not. Workplace relationships are really any kind of interpersonal relationship, but in the context of work. So things like friendships, teamwork relationships, co-workers, mentors, and leader-follower relationships are all kind of under this umbrella of my interest. So within the area of workplace relationships, I have 3 specific interests and kind of 3 corresponding guiding questions. And I'm going to go through these in order. So my first one is the emergence of workplace relationships. I'm very curious about how workplace relationships emerge. And I'm going to kind of briefly describe what emergence is, because it's a little bit of a clunky construct, but it's this idea that at an individual level, which is sometimes called level 1, you have behavior and attitudes and all kinds of attributes of a person at this level. But then a person is interacting with other people So that's the dyadic relationship. They're interacting with one other person, and how they behave and how the other individual behaves, their other relational partner, as it's sometimes called, will create things at a group or team level, like a social structure, for example. And this is really just one example of emergence and how it works. I've done projects like studying things like leadership emergence, where we look at how an individual behaves in a group context and how they have and their interactions with everybody on their team. So all possible dyadic pairings of a team, for example, a team of 4, and how eventually those interactions and individual behaviors will result in creating a somewhat hierarchical structure where there is a leader, and the leader has emerged from the members of the team. So my guiding research question here is, how does individual behaviors, psychological states, and social structures affect the emergence of workplace relationships at the dyadic, team, and organizational levels? My next area of interest is in relationship maintenance. And my interest in relationship maintenance gets at how relational processes and emergent states together can continue help the relationships that have emerged continue to be both productive and healthy. So relational processes that I'm interested in are things like social support, so how individuals within a relationship can provide both practical and also emotional support to each other, such that they can get work done oftentimes more efficiently, but they can also continue to be healthy and have a high level of well-being. Other relationship processes that are of interest to me are things like conflict management and confidence building or motivation. Emergent states, similar to the concept of emergence that I mentioned earlier, these are things that exist at higher levels besides other than the individual level. So trust, for example, is particularly interesting to me. Trust exists at either dyadic or group levels because it's the result of interactions and feelings from multiple people. So it's an emergent state because it's referring to it not being at the individual level. So ultimately, my research question that helps guide me is what processes and emergent states are vital for workplace relationships to continue being productive and healthy. And the last area of research I want to talk about is my research in boundary spanning. So boundary spanning kind of gets at how there is different domains of life. The work domain is where IO psychologists focus most of their attention, but the work domain interacts with the non-work domain such that they both can affect each other. So my 2 areas of interest are, how can relationships cross from one domain to another? This kind of gets at certain relationships that are particularly important to people's lives that cross their domains. So, for example, if you're friends with somebody at work, you don't stop being friends with them outside of work. And you have a work relationship, but you also have a non-work relationship. So how do these relationships cross the domain? But it's even when relationships don't cross the domains, the effects of relationships can still cross the domains. So if you have an interaction with your boss, you have a leader-follower interaction with them, the effects of those interactions can affect you and therefore affect the relationships in your non-work life, such as with a romantic partner or with other family members. So my guiding research question here is, how do the effects of relationships cross from one domain to another? So how do the effects of, for example, a leader-follower relationship cross from work to home? And this could be through emotions, behaviors, and stressors, and thoughts. Okay, so I know that was quick, but I want to just end by giving a very, very heartfelt thank you to my workplace relationships. I would not be here today as a budding IO psychologist if I didn't have the support that I get from my mentors, my colleagues, and my friends. And some of the folks on this screen now fill multiple roles there, both as colleagues and friends. I am very passionate about my research, and I'm very passionate about outreach to budding scientists as well. So if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate. I have my email on the screen. It is jp63@rice.edu. I would be happy to talk via email or have a conversation and answer any questions or do anything I can to help